Perfect.
Done.
So my name is Mélanie Cantin. I'm with JURIST News. It's a website that's kind of run by law school students across Canada, the States, India, Afghanistan. It's got a whole bunch of people sort of collaborating across the world to just provide some news with more of a legal focus. So kind of like I said in the email to you today, it's definitely going to be more focused on some of the police stuff that's been going on, a little bit about the Emergency Act, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that kind of thing. So do you have any questions for me before I get started?
No, I just hope I can give you some useful insight, given that I don't have a legal background.
Oh yeah, no worries. We're mostly looking
Yeah.
for sort of just the convoy's perspective on these legal issues. So not so much like very technical legal information or anything, but sort of just your perspective on that. And if I'm kind of looking upwards, I have another screen right above my camera, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm just looking at my notes up here.
No
So
problem.
yeah, so if you can just start by maybe giving kind of your occupation or what you do, what your role is within the convoy.
Sure. Yeah. So I joined in a role of PR and media relations. So I'm largely helping BJ Dichter deal with the incredible influx of media inquiries, and of course taking some of that burden off of Tamara Lich's shoulders as the inquiries have been exploding, given the fact that this movement has just grown at such a high and fast rate. So it's basically PR, public relations, of course, as a spokesperson and media relations person.
Awesome. So we heard today from Tom Razzo during the press conference that you guys had around 1 o'clock, I believe, that most of the truckers are going to be withdrawing from downtown Ottawa. Can you kind of give us more details about what's going on with that?
Yeah, so it really pains us to be at this juncture right now where first and foremost, I'd like to reassure people that the movement is not over. It is in no shape or way dying. What's happening right now is that we are being met with police brutality to an extent that none of us had ever imagined. None of us had ever imagined, myself included, if you had told me that our prime minister would refuse dialogue and instead opt for invoking something so drastic and dramatic as the Emergencies Act against peaceful protesters and resort to force and police brutality in order to disperse people who are exercising their charter rights of free assembly and free speech, I would have not believed you. But this is what we're living right now. We're watching truck drivers having their windows smashed upon not complying with police orders to vacate the premises. They're getting their windows smashed. They're being dragged out forcefully. They're being gun butted in the head and physically attacked. We're getting riot police using tear gas, riot control agents, and really cracking down on us in a way that none of us had ever imagined. And it has come to a point where it is no longer safe to be in the downtown area for a lot of these truckers and a lot of these peaceful demonstrators. So what we're doing is essentially regrouping on the outskirts and outside of Ottawa, and reevaluating our organizational infrastructure and reevaluating our next steps. But as a movement, we are definitely nowhere near achieving our objectives, and we will continue until those objectives have been reached. As much as I'm sure you've heard that our key organizers have been slowly but surely been picked away by the police and arrested for very petty charges of mischief, or not even mischief, counseling and abetting mischief. And they're slowly but surely being released upon condition of not speaking or getting away from Ontario. And we're sort of going to hold off on announcing what our next moves are until we can get some clarity on exactly what those consequences and those bail conditions imply.
Right. So in terms of gathering on the outskirts of Ottawa, as you say, is that sort of in a nearby town, or are you really taking a step back, going as far as, Toronto, Kingston, like heading really out of Ottawa, or what's the sort of route of the convoy moving forward?
So again, the movement is, as you know very well, it has been very organic and grassroots from the get-go. It is a movement that has just exploded in terms of size And a lot of these truckers, we don't speak for personally. They can choose to go home, and some have, but insofar as some of the groups within the convoy, there's a lot of them that are retreating to the outskirts of Ottawa where they cannot be met with police brutality. We've got a few areas where they are coalescing, but I can't give you more details than that for now.
Okay. That's all right. I just kind of wanted to go back to, you're talking about a lot of police brutality and stuff. We've definitely heard some reports about that, but we also heard a lot in the beginning about protesters having really good relationships with police, and with police being a welcome presence downtown among the protesters. So I'm kind of wondering, is there an overall consensus on police? Is there disagreements as to whether they're a helpful presence or not, just in light of some of these more recent reports of brutality that you've been talking about?
For sure. Yeah, I should specify that, of course, the instances of police brutality we see definitely won't do the entire police force justice, because we've been working in close relations with the Parliamentary Protective Services, with OPP, with so many different levels of law enforcement officers, and they've been nothing but helpful throughout this time. I think that the fact that we have seen the resignation of the police chief, we have seen the resignation of a few key people within the police forces throughout the duration of this peaceful demonstration, it definitely speaks to a difference in opinion, for sure, happening within the ranks of the police force. There are a lot of police officers, and this, unfortunately, you won't see in the mainstream media, but at the front lines, there have been instances of police officers breaking rank with their line and joining the protesters, some effectively getting arrested for it. They're very moving instances. And unfortunately, we don't see that portrayed in the mainstream media, but there are a lot of police officers that disagree with what's going on because they've been there with us from day one, and they understand that this was never a violent protest. This was never what has been painted as an extremist gathering of white supremacists, because those officers that have been there on the ground with us have seen it for themselves. They've seen that this transcends political ideology, race, gender, creed. It is just a gathering of Canadians that are standing here united under the banner of freedom.
What do you believe changed to go from these really friendly relations with police to all of a sudden this violence that you're talking about?
The Emergency Measures Act, the crackdown and the importation of police forces from all around the province, and essentially just the invocation of the Emergencies Act, as you probably know a whole lot more about than myself, insofar as the legalities go. But I think that just a unilateral expression of having to curb this protest is, a lot of these officers are bound to follow orders, and that's all they're here to do. And I think that the federal government's stance is really what initiated this drastic change in approach. As you very well know, that this is the first time the Emergencies Act has been invoked in Canada, and I think that our Prime Minister Trudeau is really not doing himself any service by invoking it. I think that people who initially have disagreed with the convoy's presence or the convoy's motives are now lending a sympathetic ear, sort of taking a few steps back, reevaluating the situation, and noticing that this is absolutely a disproportionate response to something that has been peaceful from day one.
We've heard some people in relation to the Emergencies Act kind of hope that the Conservatives are going to oppose it in Parliament and kind of stand up for truckers and other protesters. We've also heard a lot of people who seem to believe that no one in Parliament actually is going to stand up for them. Actually, that was kind of a sentiment that Tom Marazzo was expressing today, that no hero had stepped up in Parliament. So what do you kind of think about that from the more political side of the Emergencies Act?
Yeah, so I can't speak for Tom Marazzo, but it's definitely disheartening to see that we haven't had any overt and significant tangible support coming from any particular political party. Of course, the Conservatives have been a lot more sympathetic to our cause than the Liberals, no doubt about that. But I think that there's a genuine disenchantment going on with our political leaders to have allowed this to go on this far. But also, insofar as your point goes on the vote on the Emergencies Act, so the debates are ongoing right now. I have heard that the decision is set to be made at 10 o'clock on Monday. Monday being a family day, so I'm not sure if that'll be proliferated until Tuesday. But our understanding and our belief, based on the people we have in our intelligence coming from within Parliament, is that it will not pass. I don't believe it will. It was called on a very baseless foundation. I can't see it being passed. But then again, you can't take my word for it. We will see where the debate leads.
On what ground, I guess, would you say that the Emergencies Act is not going to be passed? You said it's a pretty baseless claim that the government has made. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think that what we've been seeing portrayed in our mainstream media outlets is that we have been a violent gathering of protesters that were either curbing access to essential infrastructure or creating havoc in downtown Ottawa and stifling the economy. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. We know it on good authority that a lot of these businesses were issued fines upon opening throughout the protest. So it wasn't their decision to be shuttered entirely. Also, there have been no instances of violence emanating from the Freedom Convoy movement. Crime has actually gone down by a significant percentage. I'm not exactly, I don't remember the figure, but I'm sure that I could share some resources with you on that. So crime has significantly declined. The truckers have been keeping the streets clean and safe to the best of their ability with their own garbage collection system, with their own snow removal system, with their own donation system, with so many food donations coming in that they've actually been going to feed the homeless and donating them to homeless shelters. But none of that, curiously, has permeated the mainstream media. So on that point, turning back to your question on why the Emergencies Act will not pass, I think it's that it's becoming increasingly difficult for Trudeau's government to justify calling this Emergency Act based on us being a violent extremist movement. And that seems to have been the narrative that was underpinning the basis upon which this Emergency Act was invoked.
Right. So you talked about there being, no violence, a very peaceful protest. We've been seeing some stuff from the Ottawa Police Twitter saying that protesters are getting aggressive, and this is why they're sort of bringing out some of their additional, riot gear, and I think they mentioned pepper spray as well. What do you have to kind of say about what the police is telling me? Because I'm hearing one thing from you, and then I'm seeing another thing from the Ottawa Police Twitter. It's two very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, I'm sure you've seen one of those, I don't know if it was a tweet, but I was reading that the Ottawa police was saying protesters are going as far as reaching for police officers' weapons, and we've got footage of protesters being hit over the head with a baton, reaching out to protect themselves, and that is then turned around to say that this protester is reaching for a police officer's weapon. Things of that nature are being used against these demonstrators. But I can tell you that I'm right here in the middle of the red zone. I take my elevator right down, walk through the crowds, and see nothing but people singing "O Canada," linking arms, waving their flags. There's absolutely no violence going on from the protesters' side. Further to that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the cease and desist order that was issued by the lawyers here that have been trying to represent us from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. They have issued the cease and desist order to Interim Chief Bell, explaining that he has no right to be blocking demonstrators coming into the Ottawa core under the Emergencies Act, because the only people that should be blocked and kept from entering this demonstration area are people who come here with the intent of engaging in violence or blocking critical infrastructure, none of which has ever been the case here with our Freedom Convoy. So there's a lot of differences that we do have right now with Interim Chief Bell. And I think that, again, this is where that dissonance comes from. We've got one branch or Chief Bell here trying to issue orders that fundamentally violate what we know to be true under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and what the protesters are here to do. So.
All right, well, we'll definitely be coming back to the charter in a moment, but sort of more to that point of people being worried about the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. So you're telling me police are not being truthful. This is what I'm kind of hearing from you, and it's a little bit, considering in light of a lot of the businesses that have chosen to close when you've come here, pair that with the police saying that there's some violence in the crowd. It's, you can understand why we might look at those news and think that the Freedom Convoy is being violent, just with the way it's been occupying Ottawa, that kind of thing.
Of course, and I think that the term occupation is also doesn't do this movement justice. It is well within every Canadian's right to peacefully assemble and protest or stand against government policies or decisions that they disagree with. So that the whole notion of painting it as an occupation, saying that it is dangerous, saying that it is violent, really doesn't have much of a leg to stand on. And I think that by perusing what the independent media have been portraying versus what mainstream government funded media such as the CBC are portraying, you will find very, very drastically different stories on both sides. And I think that if there's anything that I can say to that, it's that should pose some questions to any viewers or onlookers. Why is it that we're getting such two fundamentally different images from independent media and mainstream media?
You've talked about crime going down in Ottawa. I guess I have to ask, what of the 100+ arrests that have been done by the police in the last couple of days? What of, some of spotting some of the white supremacist symbols in the crowd, the swastika in the early days of the protest, later on, things like the Australian Eureka flag has been spotted, which is widely seen to be a white nationalist symbol. All of that is really hinting at, some illegal activity. And we've seen the police issue a number of different fines on protesters as well. So I just really want to push on this point because
Sure.
we've just heard from so many different sources and areas on the business side, on the legal side, that the convoy is not welcome in Ottawa and that its actions are currently illegal.
Mm-hmm. And again, I have to say that insofar as our legal counsel's analysis goes, none of our actions here have been illegal. Insofar as the claims of swastikas and white supremacy imagery or flags goes, I have to tell you, I wish that you could come down to Ottawa and see it for yourself, as so many people have.
I am in Ottawa, actually. I have been among the crowd. I'm a University of Ottawa law student. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So
I've seen these hate symbols myself. That's why I'm kind of bringing it up, because I've seen those.
Great. So when I went down, I saw imagery of swastika flags being waved from a balcony up on top of Parliament that largely escaped the crowds and led us to believe that that was something that may have been planted, because on the stage and in the crowd, you will see that there are no symbols of swastikas or any type of right-wing extremist symbolism. And of course, with a movement that's expanded and exploded to this size, there will always be one or two isolated instances of some other movements or groups or interest groups coming in. And when that does happen, and when that rhetoric does somehow permeate into the media, I think that every individual should be held individually accountable for those actions, because the Freedom Convoy has never condoned any of that. We have, like, the Freedom Convoy's whole raison d'etre is to be here united under the banner of freedom and to transcend any political ideology, any religious ideology, any gender, race, creed, because this is so much bigger than all of that. And you see what has been labeled as a fringe minority initially by Justin Trudeau's government, all of a sudden elicited the invocation of an Emergencies Act due to its size. So I think that there's a lot of discrepancies and a lot of dissonance between what we are seeing reported on by the mainstream government-funded media and by what we're seeing from independent outlets and personal stories from people down on the ground. Yeah.
Right. I can understand that there are, fringe elements that can come in and sort of hijack a protest in a way. But what do you make? It
happens all the time. Yeah.
Right. What do you make of, someone like Pat King saying some arguably white nationalist rhetoric in the media, very Islamophobic, anti-Muslim, and things like, Tamara Lich is associated with the Maverick Party, often seen as a right-wing extremist party. So can we really say that we're surprised when, you guys, the Freedom Convoy, arrive in Ottawa and all of a sudden we're seeing symbols of white supremacy in the crowd? It's a little bit difficult to see that as surprising in light of such facts.
I think we can see it as surprising, and I will disagree with you on that note, because if you've been following any of the official Freedom Convoy news releases or press releases, we have stated very clearly from day one that we are not associated with Pat King. Pat King does not speak for us. Pat King is an entirely separate entity in and of himself. He is not part of the organizers. He is not represented by our legal counsel. Pat King speaks for himself, not for the Freedom Convoy, and that has been communicated time and time again through our news releases, and I am so happy to share those with you.
Was he not associated with the financial aspect of the convoy? No. The original GoFundMe, all of that stuff? No?
Tamara Lich has been the organizer and the face of the GoFundMe. I myself have not been involved with any of the financial aspects, so I will definitely leave it for Tamara Lich to comment on that element. Okay. However, I can assure you that Pat King is not affiliated with the Freedom Convoy's overall message.
Okay. Aside from Pat King, you've mentioned Tamara Lich, and we know there's Chris Barber and BJ Ditcher as well. How associated would you say do the protesters and the members of the convoy, what kind of link do they feel to the organizers? Is it sort of a little bit disparate, or do they very much kind of follow what the organizers tell them? I'm just kind of asking this in light of, many of them being arrested and are now not really able to communicate about the convoy. So I'm sort of just wondering, does that mean the movement's going to peter out? Does it mean that, they don't speak for the convoy anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to give you a little heads up. I don't want to be rude, but I think within the next 5 minutes, I have to take off. However, to that point, yes. So as you rightfully mentioned, there have been arrests. No, I think that it's important to emphasize that in this organic grassroots movement, we don't have any type of a commandeering control over people or what they do. So should some of these leaders of this movement, and I would say maybe more of the face of this movement, be arrested or issued gag orders where they can't speak anymore on behalf of the movement, I want to assure you that the movement itself is not going to peter out. We may lose our physical presence for the time being here in Ottawa, but there are tons of organizers behind the scenes and tons of people who have such a deep emotional and passionate interest in this movement, and they are going to be continuing to move forward with this. They're going to continue to stand up for the reason that everybody gathered here in the nation's capital to begin with, and that's to end mandates and end vaccine passports. And I can assure you that there are plans underway to keep this movement going and to keep the momentum alive. It doesn't necessarily have to be crystallized in the form of a presence right here physically in Ottawa.
Okay, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, I did say I wanted to come back to kind of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and all that, and I know the convoy has talked at length about how you feel as though your freedom of speech and your freedom of assembly are being breached throughout this protest. There is a section of the Charter, Section 1, you may have heard of it, and a number of people have heard of it as well, where the Charter of Rights guarantees the freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law, and can demonstrably be justified in a free and democratic society. So a lot of people have looked at the convoy and said, you know, yes, they do have freedom of speech. Yes, they have freedom of assembly, but because they're now causing a danger in Ottawa, Section 1 can be applied, and measures to shut down the convoy will probably be justified under the Charter because of Section 1. What do you have to say about that?
As we can see, is that yes, there's a clear, definitive effort to shut down the convoy. And insofar as the Emergencies Act goes, it is happening, right? We're being forced out physically from our nation's capital as we speak. But insofar as continuing the movement of the Freedom Convoy, or I should say perhaps the freedom movement, because it has come to a point where all the people who are participants in this movement it transcend the notion of it being necessarily solely related to truckers. However, they have been the backbone and the initiation of this movement. I think that there's really nothing stopping us, and nothing within the Charter provisions that would justifiably stop anybody from being able to freely express themselves and continue to advocate for a movement that they feel strongly about. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
More or less. I'm mostly
Okay.
wondering what the perception of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly among truckers seems often to us to be that these rights and freedoms are absolute, and yet we clearly have Section 1 that says that they're not, and they can be limited if it's fair in a free and democratic society. And I guess I'm wondering what you guys.
It's important to say. I think it's important to say that if it's demonstrably justified in a free society. So I think that term shouldn't be conveniently skimmed over, because if something can be demonstrably justified, and I think that this is the crux of the disagreement here and the dissonance that we're seeing between between convoy supporters and those who don't, is that we don't see it. And this is upon also legal counsel, not just from the lawyers that are representing us, from other organizations as well, is that there is a question to be raised about whether or not this is demonstrably justified. And we take issue with that, because we believe that there is really no foundation to have called in all of these measures and curbed these charter guaranteed rights and freedoms, because we don't believe that there has been anything that would lead to it being demonstrably justified.
So police allegations of violence and businesses losing millions of dollars in revenue because you have been blocking up the streets, residents suffering because of the noise. You wouldn't say that any of that is a demonstration that your rights can be, your freedom of speech and freedom of assembly can be limited under the Charter? You don't believe that?
No, because we know that the streets that have been allegedly blockaded, a lot of those blockades have been initiated by the police. There's always
That's very recent, though. That's the last couple of days.
No, that has been going on for quite some time. A lot of the blockades have been erected from day one when the convoy rolled in.
There's sorry, I misheard you. I misheard you.
Yeah. So there's been lanes that till this day are cleared for either emergency vehicles when it comes down to the downtown core, but also for external and internal traffic to be entering. I would fundamentally disagree about businesses having to be shuttered because of us. Frankly, I think that there are, I know for a fact, interviews that have been made with the few businesses that have been opened in the downtown core, and those business owners said that they have not made this much money in a very long time. So I think that looking to these personal stories and speaking with those business owners that are there on the ground would definitely shed a different light and a different perspective on this matter. And insofar as the honking goes, the truckers have been adhering to an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. honking schedule. Of course, it's understandably upsetting to some people, but I think that what needs to be really focused on is that all we've been asking for is a dialogue from our Prime Minister, and we have yet to have him dignify our presence. And I think that all of this could have been alleviated rather quickly if we had any dialogue initiated from the federal government. I'm so sorry, I will have to go soon. Is there anything else that I can
just briefly on the 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. honking, are the truckers aware that there's currently an injunction that is placing a full ban on honking downtown? And it's
sorry, I should have. Sorry, yeah. I think you misunderstood. Yeah, no, prior to the injunction, I'm saying that they had adhered to a schedule of that nature. And then when the injunction came in, they definitely heeded the injunction, yes.
So citizen reports of noise going on through the night and very early in the morning honking, all of those are just unsubstantiated?
I think certainly unsubstantiated insofar as from the invocation of the injunction goes, yes, because I've been staying here right here by the core, and I must say I've been sleeping soundly for the last few weeks. I'm sorry, I can't speak to anybody else's experience to that.
That's all right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you.
Excerpts of this may be used in articles for JURIST, and I just wanted to double check. Are you okay with this full clip being posted to our YouTube channel?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.